we'll be getting started now. Good afternoon and good evening. My name is Andy Currier, and I'm a research associate at the Oakland Institute. Thank you all for gathering in person and over Zoom to discuss the findings of the Oakland Institute's report, Endless War, the Destroyed Land, Life, and Identity of the Tamil People in Sri Lanka. The Oakland Institute, based in Oakland, California, is an independent policy think tank bringing fresh ideas and bold action to the most pressing social, economic, and environmental issues of our time. It does not receive funding from any government or political party. We will begin by hearing from Anuradha Mittal, Executive Director of the Oakland Institute, who will discuss the main findings of the report. We will then move to several speakers from civil society who are not affiliated with the report, but have joined us to share their thoughts on the main findings. Once everyone has spoken, we will take questions. For those on Zoom, please keep yourselves on mute and add any questions you may have to the chat box with the person you'd like it directed to specified. So with that, we will now begin. Anuradha, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andy. This is an emotional moment for us at the Oakland Institute. I hope this conference will go well. We have not done this before. These are strange times. Before I start, I wanted to thank especially Andy Currier for his support for the report and many researchers and authors of the report who have gone unnamed for obvious reasons, for security reasons. A new resolution on Sri Lanka is expected this week at the 46th session of the United Nations Human Rights Council. The zero draft resolution presented by the core group ignored the assessment made by the Human Rights Commissioner Bachelet, who accused Sri Lanka of reneging on promises to ensure justice. Endless War, the fourth Oakland Institute report on post-war Sri Lanka, brings forth shocking evidence on the extent of the continued persecution of the minority Tamil population in the north and east of the country, and warns how 12 years after the brutal end of the civil war, Sri Lanka is headed to become an ethnocratic state. The report offers details on how the government-led effort to geographically fragment the north and east is accompanied by a strategy to systematically erase Tamil culture and history. Under the guise of development projects, Sinhalese colonization is growing within Tamil areas with the intent to change demographics. Through irrigation schemes, military settlements, archaeological reservations, wildlife sanctuaries, forest reserves, and special economic zones, land grabbing in the north and east has worsened since the regime changed 2 years ago. Several government departments, including the Mahaveli Authority, Archaeological Department, Forest Department, Wildlife Department, are being used to deploy this strategy. Our new report also provides an update on the extent of land grabbing and the impact of widespread militarization on the population in the north and east of the country. The military occupation remains extreme since our 2015 report, The Long Shadow of War, with roughly 1 military member for every 6 civilians. The military continues to occupy vast amounts of land, running 5-star resorts, cafes, construction companies, cultivating the land it occupies. The heavy presence of the army severely impacts the lives and livelihoods of the local population. Meanwhile, thousands of Tamils, including over 23,000 people in Jafna alone, remain displaced 12 years after the end of the war, awaiting resettlement with no end in sight. Rajapaksa government's use of the military and various departments to expropriate the lands of the Tamil and Muslim populations is geared at expanding the supremacy and domination of the Sinhalese across Sri Lanka and should garner the immediate attention of the UN Human Rights Council. High Commissioner Bachelet's January 21 report on Sri Lanka stressed the need to not only ensure accountability for past human rights violations, but she called on the international community to stop and prevent possible future violence and conflict. This report exposes the reality of the destruction of land, life, and identity of the Tamil people in Sri Lanka and presents a prima facie evidence for collective international action to arrest the worsening human rights situation in the country. Land abuses have led to tension and insecurity among the Tamil and Muslim minority populations. The international community has a responsibility to take appropriate action to ensure that these conditions do not escalate the conflict. There is an immediate obligation on the part of the United Nations and the international community to innovate a safety mechanism to monitor, protect, and promote the human rights of ethnic Tamil and Muslim communities. This includes the appointment of a special rapporteur on land rights for Sri Lanka and establishment of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights field presence in the country to monitor and record ongoing human rights violations in the north and east of the country. The commissioner's calls for sanctions against top generals and others accused of war crimes and for an international criminal court investigation into Sri Lanka's Tamil separatist conflict are essential to upholding justice and human rights. The Human Rights Council resolution on Sri Lanka must include these recommendations and emphasize on immediate end of land grabbing and planned settlements, while ensuring immediate demilitarization of the north and east. Failure to do so will once again be a mockery of international human rights regime. Reconciliation, human rights, peace is not possible in Sri Lanka unless the situation is handled in accordance with international law, international justice mechanisms, and more important, morality. Thank you.
Thank you, Anuradha. We will now hear from Justice Wigneswaran, Parliamentarian and former Chief Minister of the Northern Provincial Council.
Hello, everybody. This report of Oakland Institute is very important for us. When the member countries in the United Nations Human Rights Council are deliberating what sort of resolution need to be passed with regard to Sri Lanka, this report indeed is timely and opportune. This report enlightens the facts and figures, not only to the world, but even to our own people with regard to the pathetic situation of the Tamils in the north and east, who are fast losing their traditional lands, their heritage and identity. I hope this report will open the eyes of those countries in Geneva, which are expected to take an important decision with regard to Sri Lanka soon. I'm sure many of our own people who were living cut off from reality will now open their eyes after reading this report. We need to have this report translated to Tamil and Sinhalese and have them released for our people. Our people have been continuously complaining, demonstrating, going around in processions, and intermittently fasting during the past 12 years, trying to impress upon everybody that their lands were being grabbed, their cultural identities were being destroyed, and their livelihoods were being expropriated by outsiders. But the international community did not take their complaints seriously, nor seek appropriate remedies. This is why our predicament today has exacerbated. If the military has been able to destroy centuries-old religious institutions in Valigamam North, to erect palatial army residences on the same land, the international community should shoulder part of the responsibility for their lethargy, indifference, and maybe ignorance. This report also exposes the extent to which Buddhisticization and Sinhalisation are taking place in the Mullaitivu district. The fact that there are now over 100 military camps there in Mullaitivu and 67 Buddhist places of worship have been built after the end of the war in 2009 is proof to the fact of continued military dominance and interference in these areas after the war. Thus, it is time the international community does not view Sri Lanka from a political standpoint, but instead from a wholly human rights standpoint and take appropriate steps instead. It is to be noted that the report of Madam Bachelet, Human Rights Commissioner, is a human rights-based approach. But the present zero draft has overshadowed the human rights-based approach with a mere politically oriented approach document. We are saddened by the contents of zero draft before the Human Rights Council now. While the world community discusses purely political matters in the lots of human rights violations are taking place even today here in the north and east. Like the war without witnesses that took place in 2009 and before, all the human rights violations taking place here today are also secretly being undertaken and implemented. We still do not know how many temples, churches, schools have been razed to the ground in army controlled areas in Valikamam North and elsewhere, and in their place, army camps and palaces installed. This is why we have continuously demanded an international independent inquiry in the north and east. Anuradha Mittal's report called Endless War has very effectively underlined the importance of an independent international inquiry in the north and east. We hope the world community would at least now open their eyes to the realities of the situation in north and east of Sri Lanka and take urgent, appropriate steps in this regard. I thank you.
Thank you, Justice. Next up, we have Saint Swamikal from the P2P People Uprising Movement.
Yeah. Good afternoon. I'm Velan Swamikal, representing P2P movement here. First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you, the Oakland Institute. You have done a wonderful work, and within a very short time, I was able to go through your report. It's actually strengthening our request or our struggle here, and with all accurate details, you have done a very nice report, and at the very well time you have released it. So I would like to thank the Oakland Institute and the members there on the behalf of our people here. When it is a land grabbing issue is considered, recently we had done a Provincial Polyhandi rally with the support of massive people, especially in the northeast, Tamils, even Muslims together, Tamil speaking people. We had done that rally for 5 days from February 3rd to 7th of February. And in that rally, we have several requests or demands, and one of the demand was about these land issues. So whatever you have gathered, whether it is a militarization or the wild department projects or the irrigation department projects or the archaeological department things or putting up Lord Buddha statues and establishing the temples, especially destroying our heritage and our history and putting up these temples and like grabbing the land, specifically in Jafna. If you take the Valihamam North area, the army commander, he has come here and laid the stone in the month of January to put up 100 feet of Buddha statue here in the private lands, like, and also specifically the Mullaitivu district, as you have mentioned, like each two citizens are having one military man there. So this is systematically the state is doing this land grabbing in the north and east. And our people who have participated in the Pothivilchu Polyhandi rally, their main slogans, like in Tamil language, "Emadu Nilam, Emadu Vendum," like we need our lands back. Vadakku Kilakku Tamilar Thayagam, like northeast is Tamil homeland. And like thousands of years, we are living in this our traditional, historical land, specifically in the northeast. And even as you mentioned in your report, like 23,000 people are still displaced, and still 22 IDP camps are still operating in the north, specifically even in Jafna. whereas our own people are not having the lands. And why this militarization and Sinhalisation? If the Sinhalese people were forcefully migrated in Navatkuli in Jafna district, and now they have put up a Buddhist temple over there. So these things are deliberately done, and we are helpless, and we also highly be with you, like the international law, international constitutional system, and international mechanism are very, very important. That's why we are like urging mainly to refer Sri Lanka to the International Criminal Court, so that this even the accountability process can be taken out of UNHRC, and we feel that some very strong solution we will be able to work on that. And as you mentioned, the United Nations Human Rights Council, the High Commissioner Bachelet Madam, she has given recommendations, and in the zero draft, if you take, even after that draft one, if you take, those recommendations are not considered at all. And like properly, she has done that recommendations after going through so many reports, like you, Oakland Institute, as you have done a very nice report on this land grabbing issue. And if we are doing all these reports with the truth, and if we are not following that, and all these states and countries who are in the United Nations Human Rights Council, whether the core group, the 5 countries led by Britannia, or the other 47 countries, if they are working for their own benefits, and if they don't consider this our struggle here, we are mainly requesting for justice. And like your institution, there are so many institutions, so many human activists, so many journalists, so many civil society members are fighting for these basic human rights. And if these things are not considered, and all the states, they are just playing for their politics, then what is the point of like wasting our time, like all these preparations and all these things? We don't need to do anything. So in that way, we are very strongly recommend Sri Lanka should be referred to the ICC, and there is a possibility. We don't need to worry about other factors as though some others are mentioning. So in that way, at least after this UNHRC, this 46th session is over, specifically in the northern eastern part of Sri Lanka, this land grabbing process should be put up full stop. So this specifically this session should pass a resolution where that land grabbing in the northern eastern part of Sri Lanka should be stopped forever, and all the land should be handed over to the people who are living here, who have lived here for thousands of years, and now 12 years have passed after the war is over, and nothing has happened as far as this thing is concerned. So, and also we recommend, or we request, or we want to express our opinion that this northern eastern part, wherever the lands are grabbed by the states or the state departments or the government state mechanism, those lands should be handed over back to the people, so that the real reconciliation or the real peace process will take place, and people will have faith. Otherwise, this will create another different way of thinking, and the youngsters or the people here who are living here and who are facing all these struggles, they will think we cannot live within the United Sri Lanka. We have to go separately. That type of thoughts also started coming up among the youngsters. So we urgently request all of you, even to the international community, to take this issue seriously. Thank you very much, and we will be in touch with you. And the P2P, the people rally, tens of thousands of people have participated, and they have given their concern, they have given their voice, and I think after the war is over, after 12 years, this was the first time in our history, these many people, with the support of civil societies, political leaders, religious leaders, other affected victim groups, all of us together, unitely, have done this expression, so that the international community should consider this aspect as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we will now hear from Reverend Ravi Chandran from the Civil Society.
He was expected to come in from elsewhere. I'm not sure whether he's with us or not.
Andy, perhaps we can move to the next
Yeah.
speaker.
Oh, no problem. So then we will move to Nil Amtan, a political analyst.
Yeah.
Hi. Thank you very much for the Oakland Institute. You have done a marvelous work. It has been timely released. The time should be thankful to you. What is reported is the truth, but there is a divide or a gap between the truth and the justice. The UN Human Rights Commissioner has reported the truth. All the UN special rapporteurs reported the truth. But there is a divide, or there is a gap between the truth and the justice. Where we have to work. Problem is that we don't have any illusion that the UN, so-called UN resolution, will reflect all those truths reported here or documented here. You say that it is the endless war. At the same time, in your report, you literally say that the post-war. But here we use the word the post-armed engagement period, because the war is still there, the occupation is still there, the aggression is still there. Prior to 2009, the war was carried out by the forces. After 2009, it is carried out by the government apparatus called departments. These departments are carrying out the war, the invisible war, without any resistance. Without any resistance. We raise our voice. We gather somewhere. We protest, but whatever we do, they don't take them into account. They simply carry out their occupation. This is what the reality. What you have reported is the truth, but we don't have any illusion over the resolution that it will reflect the truth which is documented. So there is a divide between the truth and the reality, the truth and the justice. We must narrow down that. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we will hear from Professor Ganesha Lingam from the University of Jafna.
He doesn't seem to be here.
He's also not available, so we can move on.
So we can move to the question and answer period now. So if anyone on Zoom has any questions, you can put them in the chat box with who you'd like it directed to. Otherwise, in the room, if there's anyone with questions, you can handle that directly.
Yeah, I would like to say thanks to the Oakland Institute on behalf of the people in the Tamil homeland, Northern East, and also on behalf of the journalists who are working in the Northern East province in Sri Lanka. This is a timely report presented by the Oakland Institute in the time the United Nations Human Rights Council sitting holding now. So this is a horrible situation here in the northern east. The genocide, the Tamil genocide is continuously, because the genocide is not only the people killing the people in the war or in another way, and also the land grabbing and cultural destroying. All of these are like a genocide. So this is the time the NGOs should be put pressure on the international community to deliver justice to the war victims, so that in this time you have done very well, very good work on through your report. So once again, we would like to say thanks to you belonging to the people in the North and East. Thank you. And also we have to say look at the newspapers and the medias in the Sri Lanka, especially in the Northeast Tamil homelands. Many of the newspapers and the other media outlets publish your story in their headlines. So we proudly say this. You have done a very good job. Thank you. I'm Swamikal, Associate Editor, Jafna Press, a newspaper publishing from the Northern East Province.
Andy, may I, first of all, thank you all. Again, I would say this is the work of many, many researchers on the ground who courageously collected information, wrote the report. We are proud to be able to partner with such courageous individuals struggling for justice despite the end of the war, a brutal end to the war nearly 12 years ago. It is good to see that it is getting some coverage, but as each one of you has said, the message, till it is heard by the powers at the UN for the wrongs and the continued wrongs that continue in Sri Lanka, our work is not yet done. So with that, I'll also invite everyone here, if you would like to ask a question in Tamil, we do have, and if I may request, Justice Wigneswaran, if there are questions in Tamil and people would like to respond, unfortunately, Andy and I are unable to answer, but we will welcome those questions in Tamil and have the answers available.
We do have one question from Zoom that we could maybe start with and then move to questions in Tamil, if that sounds good. So the question is, the government says most of the land has been given back to the owners. How much of it has been returned to the private owners, according to the Tamil politicians in the North and East?
Well, if I may answer, Andy, I think our report details very much what the situation of the return of the land has been. With the kind of militarization that we see in the North and East, it is almost a joke. When we talk about the resource that is held safe now, when we look at the situation of the people who protested and fasted for resettlement in Sampur, we clearly see that the resettlement has not happened. The fact that 23,000 people in Jafna alone are waiting for resettlement, it's a mockery. So instead of these plain words, the government of Sri Lanka has to present real evidence where people are not fasting and protesting, but actually peace is coming in the country. And that is why our report calls for international monitoring, because what we have is empty promises, empty words from the government of Sri Lanka. It was Sirisena's government, and now we have Rajapaksa, the war criminals that are actually ruling the country. So the question for the international community is, can we take their words actually as they are said, or really look for real evidence? So instead of things happening in Geneva, things need to happen on the ground with monitoring officers that can actually deliver justice to the people.
May I add something to what Anuradha said? Because with regard to the handing over of lands to the private individuals or the members of the public, we must not forget there is a larger area which is supposed to be government lands or state lands, which are in the hands of the military. There is, according to my information, it's about 60,000 to 65,000 acres of land which is being held by the military in the northern province. So we are probably also worried about these people whose private lands have been taken and not handed back. But the fact is that there is large areas which are covered or being held by the military in so many areas right around the country, right around the province. And that is very important to be kept in mind. The argument seems to be, well, these are areas which belongs to the state. Now that itself is no ground for the army to hold on, because there is a section in the 13th Amendment which says whenever the president wants to hand over lands to some people to be for any particular purpose, the consent of the provincial council should be obtained. Of course, now they have stopped the provincial council functioning, and while the provincial council is not functioning, they have brought in large areas under the control of the army. So this is also matters that need to be kept in mind, because over 60 to 65,000 acres of land is held by the military, state land, so-called state land. Yes, thank you.
Any other questions in the room? Now would be the time to ask.
Yeah, I would like to just ask one question. As this Oakland Institute is an independent think tank, were you able to produce or hand over this report to the US states or the government or who is representing in the UN, like in the core group, Britannia is taking the lead and which is supported by even the US. So is there any actions were taken to that, or any plans to push this forward in the UNHRC 46 session? Thank you.
Thank you. If I may respond, yes, we have been glad to see a good uptake of this report on the social media, and we have been sending a copy of the report to not just to the core group, but all the UNHRC and the related officials to get it before them. So the idea of the report is, as the UNHRC works on this resolution, that they have these findings, and if they still choose to make a decision which does not bring justice, they will be held accountable.
Thank you.
Of course, it would be very normal for the Sri Lankan government to deny many things which have been said. The truth is denied, but how long they could fool everybody is left to be seen, because they have this habit of denying everything. Once somebody said, we carried the book of human rights on one hand, and the gun on the other side, and that's how we fought the war. So it could be expected from the Sri Lankan government a denial of everything. But that is why we are asking for an international independent inquiry into this matter. Because you can say anything you want, because after having done it, you can deny. But then it's that inquiry which will bring out the truth. And you have brought out the truth in its pristine glory, and it is there. So it's up to the Sri Lankan government now to take cognizance of what has been said and do the needful. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with you. I think the burden of proof is now on the Sri Lankan government. This is the fourth report from the Oakland Institute on justice and human rights issues related to land grabbing in Sri Lanka and post-war Sri Lanka. These are undeniable facts, and that is where the burden of proof is on the Sri Lankan government and on the international community to take action.
ஏற்கனவே நீங்கள் செய்த ஆய்வுகள் நம்ம ஒவ்வொரு நாடுகளில் நீங்கள் ஆய்வு செய்திருக்கிறீர்கள். நாங்கள் வந்து திருப்பி ஜெனோசைட் என்று சொல்லி கொண்டிருக்கிற நிலையில நீங்கள் ஏற்கனவே செய்த ஆய்வுகளோட பலஸ்தீனமாக இருக்கலாம், தென் அமெரிக்காவோட சில இடங்களை செய்திருக்கலாம். அந்த இதோட ஒப்படைக்குள்ள என்னென்ன விடயத்தை நீங்கள் பார்ப்பாங்க?
There's a question. You have been doing various investigations into matters which have been happening in so many countries of the world. In relation to what has been happening in those countries, what is your view with regard to the state of this country or the present situation in this country?
Thank you for that question. And if I may request, would you please translate for me as I speak? Thank you. What we see in Sri Lanka is the creation of an ethnocratic state, a very deliberate very carefully strategized scheme to create a Sinhalese state instead of a democratic secular republic. This is an effort to create a state which is built on the domination of the Sinhalese. Instead of human rights for all, it is built on human rights for the Sinhalese alone. Unfortunately, the situation in Sri Lanka is not alone. As we look around the globe, we see the rise of regimes. Next door India, my own country, for instance, where you would see the suppression of minority rights for the glory of a certain religion, for the glory of the elites. However, what is common is the struggle of the people, the perseverance of people. And as was said by Justice Wigneswaran, this is so unsustainable that it cannot hold. It can continue for a year, it can continue for a decade, but a very unsustainable system of oppression built on human rights abuses is not sustainable, and it ultimately falls apart. And that is what Commissioner Bachelet's report says. It is not just talking about human rights abuses in the past. It talks about the fear of continued instability, the fear of continued war. That's why she calls for international intervention. And I think that is what is required in case of Sri Lanka. Personally, I always gain belief and also confidence when we look at struggles around the world that the oppression ends. And so do I believe that there will be justice for the victims of mass widespread abuses in Sri Lanka, that there will be justice for them also one day, and one day soon.
குறிப்பாக வந்து இப்ப தொடர்ந்து நில அளவில், அதாவது ஒரு புறம் நீங்கள் ஆக்கிரமிக்கப்பட்ட இடத்தை பற்றி காட்டியிருக்கிறீர்கள், தொடர்ந்து இலங்கை முப்படைகளுக்காகவும் காணிகள் அளவிடப்படுற ஒரு பணி போய்கொண்டே இருக்குது. நடவடிக்கை ஐநாவில் இடம்பெற்றுக் கொண்டிருக்கிற அதே நேரத்தில் அதை பற்றி எதுவுமே பொருட்படுத்தாமல் இந்த காணிகளை புதிதாக சுவீகரிக்கிறதுக்கு நிரந்தரமாக செய்யப்படும் முயற்சி, அதில் நீங்கள் எவ்வாறு அழைக்கிறீர்கள், அதை பார்க்கலாம்.
There is a tendency on the part of the military and the government to take in more and more lands, grab more and more lands and keep to themselves, at least through the military. And that is a continuing process. And despite all what is being done and said, this is a continuing process. How would you see this process of newly acquiring or grabbing lands by the military?
We last did a report in 2015, and since then several reports which clearly show the intent of the Sri Lankan government to continue to appropriate lands in the north and east, lands that belong to the minority populations of Tamil, Muslims, Christians. Does that mean that they have won? No. It is going to be incredibly important to continue to document. This report becomes important because it continues to document the reality, the truth on the ground, the fact that the Sri Lankan government would like to present a new phase, that the war is over, that there's no need to worry, there's no insecurity. Sri Lanka is a destination to travel to. These reports become really important to continue to document human rights abuses, the continued seizure of lands in the north and east. Because as I said before, justice might be delayed, but it cannot be ignored forever. And this is going to be incredibly important for the P2P rally, for the mothers who are waiting for their sons, their loved ones to return home, just because the world says it was 12 years ago. Justice has not yet come. And that's why we at the Institute would continue to monitor, would continue to put out reports, because the truth at the end is the only thing that matters. And without that truth, there can be no reconciliation. Without the acknowledgement of the truth, the war crimes that were committed, there can be no reconciliation. And though this process, however painful it is, however hard it is, becomes really important.
Last question. அதாவது வடக்கில் வடமாகாணத்துக்கு உட்பட்ட காணிகள் தொடர்பாக, அரச காணிகள் தொடர்பாக கையாளுகின்ற காணி சீர்திருத்த ஆணைக்குழுவின் அலுவலகம் அனுராதபுரத்துக்கு மாற்றப்பட்டிருக்கு. நேற்று யாழ்ப்பாணம் மாவட்ட செயலகத்தில் இருந்த முக்கியமான ஆவணங்கள் பல அனுராதபுரத்திற்கு எதிர்ப்புகள் மத்தியில் கொண்டு செல்லப்படுகிறது. எதிர்வருகின்ற காலங்களில் பல இடங்களில் ஏற்கனவே தீவக பகுதிகள் பல பகுதிகளில் வந்து இலங்கைக்குள்ள தெற்கை சேர்ந்தவர்களுக்கு அப்பால சர்வதேச நாடுகள் பலவற்றிற்கும் வழங்கக்கூடிய ஒரு சூழல் இருக்குது. அதால் இறைமை என்பது தமிழ் தேசத்தில் இறைமை என்பது மிகப்பெரிய கேள்விக்குள்ளாக போகிறது. இதை பற்றி என்ன?
The Land Reform Commission, under the Land Reform Commission, quite a lot of lands, acres of lands, were taken over by the government. Over the ceiling, the amount of lands that were taken. Now the department which deals with this, the Land Reform Commission, has been within the last few days shifted to Anuradha. So the purpose is those lands, I think the fear is that it is going to be handed over to people from outside or even companies which may be having their head offices in certain countries outside, and the lands of the Tamils are now going to be distributed among the Sinhalese and these companies from elsewhere. Now, when such a process is going on, the people are helpless. They are unable to do anything about it. And despite it being said that from Jafna it has not been sent out, all the files are in Jafna, there are a lot of other areas in the Vanni where what is taking place or where whether the files have been sent or not, have been withheld, we do not know. So is there any way by which this can be looked upon by the international community, and what can we do about it?
Thank you for that questions. First of all, people's struggles have been able to stop several of these land grabbing deals in some of the cases. So one cannot overemphasize the need for a mass movement against land grabbing. Secondly, I would also urge the media to do investigations, create awareness. This is the role that we also play at the Oakland Institute. The purpose of our research was to create this awareness, and that is a major role that the research institutions can play. Civil society needs to continue with the democratic struggles. It definitely feels very hard. Information is not always readily available. But again, as I said, this report was done with researchers on the ground, communities on the ground, individuals who very courageously collected this information, feeding their information to the Institute. So this work is going to be as important as a struggle for independence. So we can continue to have democratic struggles. This can be information that can be brought to the international community. It's almost like the Dracula. If you drag it out in the sunlight, it'll have no place to hide or to run. So I would urge everyone in the room, journalists especially, so please continue with your investigations. And I would also just say, we at the Institute make a promise that we'll continue to collect evidence. We'll continue to work with individuals on the ground and continue to bring this evidence to the international community. This is not just a problem of the Tamils. This is not just the struggle of the Tamil population in Sri Lanka. This is an international human rights abuses being carried out. This is the responsibility of the international community. And as a member of the international community, we'll continue to focus on land grabbing issues and bring it to the international community with your support.
Thank you very much, Anuradha, because that exactly is the feelings that we have. But while you were saying it, I was wanting to ask you a question. It's not a question, it's more an observation. That there is a possibility of those who are helping you at this end being victimized in some form or the other. They will now try to find out from where you got your information from and try and go and give them lots of problems and question them, take them into custody and so on false charges. This is just to keep you informed. These are things which are happening. Even with regard to the Polihandi Pothubil march, I was also questioned, and various questions were posed, and it was two and a half hours or 3 hours of questioning. So there will be others also who will be subjected to it. But I just want to keep you informed that this is the present position in Sri Lanka as far as the northeastern Tamils are concerned.
Thank you. And that is a very grim reality that we are unfortunately very aware of. That the criminalization of dissent, criminalization of truth speaking, and this is why, again, in the report, we could not acknowledge the names of the researchers, we could not acknowledge the authors of the report. I would just say that with growing international attention, the Sri Lankan government would do better by providing justice and ensuring justice rather than trying to find the truth seekers. It is shameful that the government's efforts would be directed to that. We want to be kept informed. We will be keeping a very close watch. Intimidation, harassment, arrest, or anything that the Sri Lankan government does, it just provides more proof of its intent. And so our concern is not just to put out a report, but our concern is also for the well-being of the courageous citizens of Sri Lanka who are trying to ensure that there's a democracy, that there is a human rights regime in the country. And so I would just say for Sri Lankan government, it would do better to provide justice than to try to find out who our resources are. I can also assure the Sri Lankan government that there is no way they will be able to find out who our resources are, who our researchers are. We are, if not more, just as smart as they are.
Thank you.
Yeah, again, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you. You have also mentioned that your work will continue, and this is not only the struggle in Sri Lanka for Tamils, but it's again human rights. It's internationally, there are some people who are working for justice and who are truthful without any expectations. So in that way, we also appreciate your efforts and your work, and we would like to thank you very much, and we will be in touch with you. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, I cannot overemphasize the need for documentation, the need for research. We depend on many, many individuals who are conducting this research, whether it is in their own community that the lands are taken over for a stupa, for a vihara, or for military occupation, the false promises of resettlement. So we only ask for your partnership in continuing to provide that information and use us as a resource to put that information out with confidence, without fears of intimidation and harassment. As I said, it is just as important for us to ensure the safety of our researchers, journalists who are documenting. So please feel free to be in touch with us if you find any documentation or you face harassment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that bring to a conclusion or?
Andy, do we have any other questions or?
We do have another question. If I pose that now. So the government is now asking the masses to register with the Provincial Land Commissioner if they're living on government lands without legal deeds so that they can issue deeds. Essentially, is this a good thing for the Tamils to do, or will it make things worse for them?
I personally think it has to be very carefully, what shall we say, investigated upon, because there are so many people who will claim to have been on those lands for a long period, and there will be governmental support for that, and they may be given, and those are people who have come from outside the province. So it may not be the people of that area, but if they were people of the area who have not been given such certificates or their permits or whatever it is, then certainly it will be welcome. So the fear we have is because there is no provincial council administration, our officers, or at least the officers who will be very conscious of the needs of the people of the area, may not be in the panel that may be selecting these people and handing over such documents. And since this is now being transferred to, at least with regard to the Land Reform Commission lands, it's being transferred to Anuradha, that nothing prevents the government from getting people from elsewhere to choose the people to whom it should be given. And especially when civil work is being done by the army or by the military, and more military personnel are being brought into civil administration, if it is done by them, you can be rest assured this particular matter may not be to the benefit of the people of the area, but it needs to be investigated upon.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions that we have. I want to thank all the speakers for attending and sharing their insight on the report's findings, and everyone else for attending on Zoom and in person. Unless there's anything else, I think we will wrap it up.
Thank you, Andy. I'll just say again, amidst COVID, we want to express a deep gratitude to all of you who came to Jafna Press Club. We want to again thank the researchers and the authors of the report who made this work possible. This is the start of the journey again for us. We will continue to send this report to all the offices of the different countries in Geneva, to the different officials, and we look forward to your support. Again, I cannot overemphasize the need for continued documentation and research. Please do stay in touch with us, and please do stay safe and strong. Thank you.
May I also add, while thanking for everything that has been done, that the copies of it be sent to all our parliamentarians, 225 of them. It may be very useful, whether they like it or not. The matter that a document of this nature has come out and that it is before them might have some effect on those who are more or less uncommitted with regard to what is going on. So may I call upon, I don't know who will do it, the organizers to send in copies of this report to all our parliamentarians, 225 in number. Thank you. Thanks, Anuradha. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we'll definitely take that into account and get the list of the parliamentarians and send a copy of the report to them. Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and have a good day. Thank you very much.